For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. I am Surya Gangadharan. This evening we are going to look at India-China trade. As you've probably read the reports, trade is actually booming, if you want to call it that, at around $125 billion or so. And this is despite all the tensions on the line of actual control. So let me bring up a small graphic that I made for you, just giving us a few facts about this trade. The imports from China, this is the most important. The imports from China were over $97 billion. Exports, on the other hand, were around $28 billion, which is not even near the halfway mark. The trade deficit obviously has grown to $69 billion, quite a staggering figure. And India remains largely a commodity exporter to China, meaning that we export mostly stuff like rice and agri products. Yeah. So that's the situation now as far as India-China trade is concerned. So I'm going to turn to my guest this evening, Professor Biswajit Dhar of Jawaharlal Nehru University. He's at the Center for Economic Studies in JNU and is a well-known trade specialist. Professor Biswajit, thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So the Chinese say that these trade figures represent the complementarity between the two economies. Is that really the point here, or is it the fact that China is factory to the world and therefore it gives you anything you want?
Yeah, it's a second issue that you just mentioned, that in China is really the factory of the world, and it's been pushing its products very aggressively for close to 2 decades, and we have now become one of their largest recipient of their products, and it's a whole range of products that we import from them. What is more concerning is that India-China trade looks more like the colonial trade, because India is importing a lot of raw materials from China. China is importing a lot of raw materials and intermediates from India, and India is importing the finished products. So clearly, the value addition is in favor of China, and if you like, we are ending up exporting a lot of jobs. Now, a lot of our critical sectors are now completely dependent on Chinese, intermediate. For instance, pharmaceuticals. We pride ourselves saying that we are a pharmacy of the world, and we are exporting our products not just to the developing countries, but also to the developed countries. But a very large proportion of the bulk drugs that are used for the formulations that we produce, because India is basically a formulation manufacturer. We don't produce too much of bulk drugs. Now that comes from China. And that's a really area of concern that we have been flagging for the past several years. Now, again, if you look at the pattern of trade which has emerged since the pandemic, and this increase in trade that you talked about in 2021, it started actually in the second half of 2020. This increase in exports that you talk about, exports have actually gone from something in the range of $13 to $15 billion to now over $28 billion. Now, a bulk of those exports are, raw materials like iron ores, intermediate like iron and steel, and also for the first time we are exporting rice to China. In fact, exports of non-basmati rice have gone up quite significantly to China. Also, sugar. So you can see this kind of a trade pattern which is emerging, and I think what we are going to be, my hunch is that as the Indian economy sort of rebounds and manufacturing really comes back on its own, post-pandemic, this kind of dependence that we are seeing on China is going to only increase. So what we are looking at in terms of our imports, which you just showed, this $97 billion according to Chinese sources, And let me also, indicate here that the total imports from China is actually more than the total trade between India and China for the ever. I think the 97 billion that we have imported from China is more than the total volume of trade between these countries in the past. So that's how things have actually panned out.
Mhm. These are long-standing issues, isn't it, Professor Biswajit? Because we've been talking about it even before, and the Indian embassy in Beijing says that it's because they don't allow the import of areas, say, IT products, where we have strength. Is that what we seem to lack leverage?
No, I think there are several issues. Of course, everyone knows that China uses its trade policy in a very strategic manner. If I put it diplomatically, and this is an issue that had to be sorted out, because I think China has been getting its way across against most of the trade partners, and India is no exception. So
Yes.
there have been accusations in the past that China is not giving proper market access to agricultural products, for instance, and several manufacturing products, because China uses all kinds of what we call non-tariff barriers. They can
Yeah.
be they can be food safety standards. They can be other kinds of standards. Uh, because in the game today that is being played out in trade is that tariffs have become really a non-issue, because
Mhm.
China imposes very low tariffs. The entire game has shifted towards non-tariff barriers, and most of these are in the form of technical standards.
I see.
Now,
Mhm.
I think that's a game that India is not playing very well, in my view, because I think our products, whatever you might say, we all know it ourselves as consumers, that our products are really do not meet the needs of the standards that the consumers would like these products to
Yeah.
be of. The quality standards are actually lacking.
Mhm.
So India needs to first put its own house in order, and then take on the challenge that the Chinese are posing to us.
Mhm. Now, I recall at the last informal summit in Chennai, there was some kind of an understanding that India's finance minister and their vice minister would come together and look at how these issues can be resolved. Did that ever take off, that proposal?
No, it actually, it's become a big victim of the political problems that we're having between the countries. So
Mhm.
this dialogue has not really taken place the way we thought it would, and therefore, and in the interregnum, China is actually benefiting, because if you look at the explosion in the trade deficit that has happened this calendar year, it's really extremely startling.
Mhm. The fact that China categorizes itself as a developing country in the WTO, does that have an issue here?
Not really, because because most developing countries like India take it as an advantage in terms of imposing higher levels of tariffs. Yeah, so that's the most obvious advantage that developing countries would have. But as I mentioned to you, that China, on the tariff front, China has become much more liberalized. So that's an advantage that China, is not taking as a developing country. So that really doesn't matter much.
Mhm. And would you say that the India-China trade pattern is also reflects the fact that China has similar patterns with other countries,
Yes,
maybe the US?
yeah. Even with the developed countries, China has this kind of a trade pattern, and in the past there have been disputes in the WTO over on the fact that China actually has put controls over export of raw materials from its own shores, but
Mhm.
it actually imports raw materials from wherever it can, including Europe. So there was a dispute in the WTO saying that China is unfairly using its trade policies, and a lot of the strategic material used in the electronics and the other high tech areas, those raw materials are not allowed to be exported from China. So it's pretty much a similar kind of a pattern that we are seeing, uh, trade between China and other countries.
Mhm. So what does India do? What is the medium term? What do we do? Long term, what do we do?
Look, it's very clear that if we have to reduce kind of dependence on China, then we have to get our own manufacturing sector, sort of up and running.
Mhm.
And it's not enough to have a manufacturing sector that is up and running. That is not enough to just produce domestically. It also has to be efficient, because they have to stand up to competition from China.
Yeah.
Now, you recall that post pandemic we took a series of initiatives, and this was
Yeah.
actually in response to the growing trade deficit against China. And starting with this whole Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign, and then it's very clear who it was aimed at. We were actually trying to develop ourselves, trying to get all, sort of in an attempt to decouple from China. Let me put it this way. And then there were explicit sort of controls put on investments from China and Hong Kong. Now, uh, but unfortunately, I would say that after 1.5 years, we don't see much of a movement that has happened
Mhm.
on these initiatives. The government has kept on announcing all these the schemes under the production linked
PLI.
incentive scheme. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I would say that like I said earlier, that it's not enough to just produce here. Right? And it's also very important to produce efficiently. Now, there,
Yeah.
I don't think there is any clue, as to how you're going to go about doing that. Now, for instance, as far as uh, the whole area of technology is concerned, and technology development is concerned, we are not taking any initiative. And why I'm saying is that if you have to become globally competitive, you need uh, the appropriate technologies, and the market for technology is completely closed. There is nothing called technology transfer that India has been talking about, sort of in most forums. No one transfers technology. We buy and sell technologies, and buying technology has become extremely problematic because of the conditions that are attached. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what China did, in terms of strengthening its own sinews, and sort of becoming stronger by developing, sort of having a very strong technological base, that is something that India needs to sort of plan in the medium term. Yeah? And without which we are not going to go anywhere. But the problem is that we have kept talking about all these things, that we have uh, repeatedly said that this is what India needs to do in the medium term, but nothing seems to have taken off.
Mhm. But you mean to say that these PLI schemes, which is being expanded all the time into so many other sectors, these will take time to show results, or even that is not enough?
No, no. Like I said, that the emphasis seems to be just to produce domestically. Yeah,
Okay.
and this seems to be coupling very well with the Atmanirbhar Bharat thing, which appeared to be a kind of a strategy for self-reliance. We sort
Yeah.
of going back to that import substitution kind of a model. Yeah, and so what I'm emphasizing is that the PLI, we can't just emphasize on production, but we need to emphasize on production and producing efficiently, and to be
Mhm.
globally competitive. Now,
Mhm.
this kind of a narrative doesn't seem to be coming very clearly in the PLI, the whole PLI scheme.
So, Professor, what does India do in the medium term and the long term?
Yeah, I think the in the medium term, it's very important to ensure that we have a very strong manufacturing base, which is globally competitive. Now, we need to be selective, because I don't think we can produce all and sundry. We can't go back to the import substitution period where we wanted to produce everything here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there has to be very strategic, sort of decision taken by the government, not just to produce, but to produce efficiently and to ensure that these industries stand up to global competition. Uh, that's the only way we can actually face the Chinese competition, because you need to compete with them. And in the longer term, it's also very important for us to strengthen our technological strength, because China gives a very good provides a very good model for that. China started producing. Started its focusing on its manufacturing sector initially, and then moved on to this whole area of technology, knowing very well that it's going to face headwinds from the developed countries when it comes to accessing technology. Now we
Mhm.
are almost in the same kind of a situation. So we need to understand that without a strong technological base in this country, manufacturing sector cannot be sort of on its own. You can't stand up to competition in the longer run. So I would say that we need to take this two-pronged strategy. We've been talking about it for a long time, but it's high time, looking at the kind of trade relations that we got enmeshed into with China, that it happens just immediately. This kind of a strategy is put in place immediately.
Mhm. You mentioned earlier that the more we go into manufacturing, the greater our dependence on China will go up. I mean, is that that's what you said?
No, I said that what happened is that because of the kind of division of labor we have got started into, and this has happened for the past 15 years or so, 15, 17 years. uh, we are now now find ourselves in a situation that if we produce more, if the manufacturing sector starts producing more, our dependence on China actually increases. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now we need to break this kind of the jinx that we have,
Mhm.
and that's why I'm emphasizing that we need a very move strategically to strengthen our manufacturing, so that at the end of the day, the dependence that we have on China reduces, to some extent.
Mhm. So in that connection, all these FTAs that we are planning with various countries, UAE and Australia and the UK, could those help, or does it
Well,
only broaden our dependence on a whole lot of other players?
see, these FTAs are not going to be fundamentally changing our production structure.
Mhm.
So if you like, if suppose through these FTAs we find better market access for our pharmaceutical products in some of these countries, which means that we'll have to import more bulk drugs from China.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, yeah. So we are in that catch 22 kind of a situation.
Uh-huh. My God, is there no way out of this? I mean, unless
No,
China decides that it wants to get out of that line of manufacturing.
yeah, then we are in a big problem, because like I said, that a big sector like pharmaceuticals, and we have actually developed this industry over the past almost 4 decades.
Yeah.
uh, Suddenly we find that we hadn't actually paid much attention to the bulk drug sector. The big manufacturing companies here, they found it cheaper to import bulk drugs from China, and that's the way it had been happening. Yeah. And while we have been pointing this out repeatedly, that this you cannot let an important strategic sector like pharmaceuticals be completely dependent on China. Very little was done here.
Mhm. In fact, if I recall, many of our public sector pharma firms were kind of shut down or got rid of. I
Absolutely. So
recall.
those were the companies which were producing the bulk drugs. So from the 90s, we got into this kind of thing about sort of privatization or downsizing the public sector,
Mhm.
realizing little that most of these public sector units were actually producing the critical intermediates that would be used by the front end manufacturing firms. So the public sector units were basically the critical pillars on which the private sector in India was standing. Now,
Mhm.
so if you pull the rug and take out the public sector, then you only have these guys, the private sector unit standing, and
Mhm.
of course, then they would look for the cheapest source of
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
intermediates and be dependent on them.
So, is it possible now to go back to that?
No,
How do you go
like I
back to that
said,
now?
you can't actually have a wholesale kind of the framework of that kind what we had before liberalization. So what we
Mhm.
need to do is that I've been emphasizing that we need to move strategically. So, for instance, there is no option other than strengthening our bulk drugs manufacturing sector in India. There is
Mhm.
no option. So that's something that needs to be done. Then we have taken some initiatives on say the electronics sector. We need to so the raw materials have to come from some of these intermediates have to come from India. Again, it's impossible to completely throw out China. It's a question
Yeah.
of reducing the dependence rather than removing the dependence.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, I find even somehow the Chinese have moved with a certain vision, a strategic vision. Perhaps their system
Yes.
allows it.
Yes.
In our case, it's so diffused and rather vague, and perhaps the central governments never paid that much attention to developing, those kind of
No,
strengths.
no, no. Actually, I've been actually following the whole development of the manufacturing sector in China, and they have this a program called Making China 2025. Yeah,
Mhm.
and if you look at the document, you'll realize that Making China 2025 actually targets the major target is to make China leader of the manufacturing sector by 2049. This is 100
Mhm.
years. Huh? And they started this whole program in 2015. So
Mhm.
this is the kind of a time scale that China has. So when we look at what is happening today, we realize the kind of long term vision that Deng Xiaoping had. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So Deng had a very clear vision that he really wanted to make China, a strong sort of economy, globally
Mhm.
strong economy. He's just not talking about having smaller targets. Now we started along the same took the same pathway. We had the Make in India program in 2014, but it's completely lost its way. So the 8 years that this program has been in place, I don't think we can claim any success. Even
Yeah.
a single sector which had benefited from this particular program.
Mhm. So, last question: do you see any light on the horizon when you look at this Atmanirbhar and PLI and all that? I mean, I know you've mentioned that we need to produce goods more efficiently, and hopefully our industry will realize, what the stakes are. But otherwise, do you see long term, maybe a decade from now, something changing?
No, it can't actually. See, it can't if you just leave the industry to itself. Because see, whenever these kinds of changes have happened, there has been a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
It's the governments which actually provide a longer-term perspective, because industry has become more and more sort of short-termist. Yeah, they would only go for, and you can't blame them, because they're looking at the bottom lines. They would try to make the maximum in the shortest period of time. So
Yeah.
it's the government which comes in and does the backstopping. And only when that happens, only when we see a effective public-private partnership where, like for instance, in the Southeast Asian countries, Japan, Korea
Yeah.
included, in East Asian countries, you had a very strong relationship between the government and the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. It was actually driving the industry forward, setting targets from them, and had a carrot and stick policy, and ensured that the industry actually stood up to global kind of demands. Yeah. Now here we don't have that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have gone too much on the other side, from being completely state dominated. After 90s, we thought that we have just released the private sector from all its shackles, and the private sector is going to keep running on now. Yeah. But the problem is that the private sector, which was actually holding on to the umbilical cord, or with the apron strings of the government for such a long time. So if you suddenly cut the umbilical cord, it's going to just fall flat. Yeah. So this is something that our policymakers don't seem to appreciate. They keep emphasizing the point that yes, they have given the private sector all the freedom to excel. But in order to excel, you need much more than complete freedom. You actually need a lot of hand holding, which seems to be completely missing.
So, frankly, no real hard or easy, a lot of hard solutions up there, which hopefully government will take note of, and one hopes they are moving forward on that in that direction. But
Right.
as far as the next few years is concerned, I think China is here to stay, and there's no getting away from that.
Absolutely.
Professor Biswajit Dhar, sir, thank you very much for the
My
insight,
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for
and
having me.
pleasure talking to you, sir.
Thanks.
And for all of you out there who've been following this conversation, continue tracking us on our YouTube channel. Keep on to us with your comments, observations, and questions. They're always welcome. Follow us on social media, including Instagram and Twitter. Thank you very much. Good night.